Yeah, thank you, and I want to thank Innovative Farmers for inviting me all the way here to Ontario to speak. You'll soon learn I'm not a good public speaker. I'd rather talk to farmers one-on-one. But over the years, I've been to a lot of these seminars, learned a lot from great people like Dwayne Beck. And Dwayne, I'm sure you remember Jim Kinsella. He was kind of our steward of no-till farming from Illinois back in the 90s. And I'm kind of like the band member or the roadie that never got to perform. I feel like I'm opening for George Strait here or something. I'm the new guy on the block, and to follow greats like Dwayne and stuff. Just a little bit about myself. Like I say, third generation farmer from Butler County, Iowa. We're in the northeast part of Iowa. See if we got the PowerPoint up here. I farm, with my wife, my son Clay, and our partner and friend Bruce Swinton, covering about 4,000 acres. Our geography is very similar to talking to some of you guys. Kind of our pinpoint, our favorite hybrid is a 107-day hybrid, and our favorite bean is a 2.4. And, like everybody, either side of that. When I was growing up in the 60s and early 70s, I kind of grew up on a 1850 Oliver pulling a 5-bottom moldboard plow, and that's why I still can't hear out of this left ear very good. And then we graduated to a 1566 International on that plow. Here's a picture of one of our fields in our farming operation. Our area is very dense with ethanol plants. We probably have 4 or 5 ethanol plants within an hour drive. This one happens to be right in my back door. It's 4 miles from my grain bins. As I'm driving or coming here from Toronto, seeing all these axles under these trucks you guys put under there. I sure don't need that when I'm only hauling my corn 4 miles at a time. But at an earlier presentation I did at the No-Till conference in Cedar Rapids, I kind of put this up. It kind of refers more to an Iowa corn grower. But you definitely got to have the passion for farming, that passion to grow food, and now we're growing fuel to make a great economy great. The first thing, and I guess I might have to disagree a little bit with Dwayne on that, our first step, if we don't have drainage in the soil, and talking to a lot of you guys up here, you're kind of in that same train of thought. If we don't have good drainage, it doesn't matter what cropping system you're going to use, whether it's no-till, full tillage, StripTill, it's just not going to work. On our slopes, if it's not a good drained farm, you just have way too much runoff coming off. We work closely, maybe some of you have a Johnson drainage plow out of Clarksville, Iowa, kind of more of a farmer style plow than the Wolf or the Bronze. He's a good friend, good neighbor, and we work closely with him when we're doing our drainage. This is what can happen when you don't have drainage. This is on a rented farm. I'm sure you've all been there, done that. That kind of makes a bad day. Call 2 wreckers. By the time we got done trying to work the tractor out, we had both outside duals on the front end flat, broke the beads on them and stuff. But hey, we made it through. Kind of some of my first steps into conservation farming. Basically 1990, Dad and I bought a 750 no-till drill. Everybody remembers them. That really put no-till on the market. It took a company like John Deere to validate that no-till was okay. Before that, we had the Ty drills, the Great Plains. In our area, there was a Speedy brand. But it took John Deere to really validate that no-till was okay. Speaking of John Deere, if any of you have been I'm about 30 miles from Waterloo, Iowa, and I know a lot of you probably have toured the plant there. That's where I know all your 8,000 series John Deeres come from. But then as we no-tilled, I wasn't happy with my corn stands. We had thrown about every attachment on that planter possible, and still just wasn't getting that good early growth that we liked. And then about 96, then I started, this is kind of my first strip till, or zone tillage as they called it. This Rawson system, I believe Ray Rawson was out of north central Michigan. That worked pretty good. The concept of banding those nutrients, this is where I kind of really learned that concept. But I didn't like the fact when you're running that through the field, your colders are churning up that wetter, sticky soil. The planter is basically a half a second right behind it. And that planter just never performed good in that wet, sticky soil. And then in 97, after being out to Jim Kinsella's farm, and he was one of the first guys doing strip till, I kind of played around building a homemade rig. You know, funds weren't real deep back then. So we just kind of used what we had in the shed. Bought an old 7000 John Deere planter frame, pulled my anhydrous knives off that, put on that John Deere frame, saddle tanks on the 1086 and the John Blue pump, and we were strip tilling. And it didn't work bad. It kind of gave us that little dry soil to make that planter perform right in the spring. Then as we evolved, started working some with progressive row units. Something the central Illinois boys don't realize is we have rock up in northeast Iowa, and big rock. So we tended to destroy a lot of equipment. But we got by, and we used this for, about 8 years in there. And then in 2008, our farming operation grew. Like I mentioned, that Bruce Swinton that works with us, he had an opportunity to take over some ground from a retiring farmer, and we knew our 8-row equipment wasn't going to handle it anymore. And I still believed in the strip till, banding those nutrients, putting the nutrients where they're most efficient. And to move to a 16-row shank type machine was going to take a heck of a horse. And we had been kind of looking at the spring strip till. So we kind of settled on this. That's the Dawn Pluribus row units. The Harvest International toolbar that was designed by Milford Friesen. Most of you, I'm sure, have never met Milford Friesen, but you've all heard of the Friesen toolbars. You know, a lot of the planter industry use that. This is a similar concept, only built heavier. And Milford, well, back in 08, he was out to our farm for 2 weeks. This is the very first one he had built of this heavier strip till design. And a couple stories on old Milford. Like I say, he's probably in his late 70s now. He likes to talk about his patent lawyer. So he's built this planter toolbar, back in the 90s. Went and got some patents on it, and did pretty good with that. But he goes back years later to the same lawyer, getting patent on a couple other things, and the lawyer says, "Well, Milford, how'd you do on that first patents we did, on that folding toolbar?" And Milford says, "Well, tell you what, I got 3 customers." Lawyer kind of looks at him and says, 3 customers? You didn't make much money on that. He said, "Yeah, but my 3 customers are John Deere, Case IH, and ADCO." So that's a little story on old Milford. And that man's a genius. And literally, and he does not know how to run a CAD drawing and stuff. My son knows all that. But I swear Milford can draw more on a barroom napkin than anybody can on a CAD computer. So in 2008, we transitioned to the spring strip till. A little closer up picture of that. And then in 2014, this will be our first year, basically then that was a 16-row rig that we were using in 2008, and then the operation has grown a little more custom work. So then we decided to go to a 24-row. The big mistake, or not a mistake, in 2012 we had a terrible drought through the upper Midwest. I don't think that affected you guys as bad. But we had some fields that, man, we were, could tell we're going to be in that 40 to 80 bushel corn range. We were still on the 16-row system. I went to get the misery over quicker. I bought a 12-row corn head. Well, that kind of catapulted us to, okay, let's go to the 24-row rig then the following year. So this is a picture of the bare toolbar coming out of the Harvest International shop. And that's as we're assembling it, putting the row units on, then adding the Montag fertilizer delivery cart, getting that all plumbed into there. Another picture. And we're pulling this with the Steiger 400. The 16-row worked excellent behind the 300-horse front wheel assist. Once we went to this, we just need a little more oomph up front. Picture of it going through the field, and you see we don't have any markers on it. We're using a Trimble FMX with the True Guide passive implement steering. If my son was along, he could explain that a lot better. He's kind of taken over that whole technology part of our farming operation. But basically, we're carrying a globe on the toolbar along with the globe on the tractor, so we're getting that perfect gap row on that toolbar, kind of passive implement steering. There's our crew, my son on the left, there Clay, me in the middle, and then Bruce on the right. Bruce does most of the strip tilling. I mean, we all share, run different stuff if somebody's got to be gone or something, but Bruce Sprewell is the operator on the strip till rig. And here's some pictures of after we've been through with that Dawn Pluribus unit. We're running basically, my favorite time is 24 hours ahead of the corn planter. You know, run this one day, corn planter the next day. That ground will gray off, dry off. I talked to a couple other guys here that run in the same type of unit. And you can even be a half a day behind it if you want to. Here's a video of it running through the field. This particular field happened to, we did run a fall vertical till on these corn stalks the fall before. And we're typically running right around that 8.25 mile an hour. So at least in our English system, some quick math, is 8.25 mile an hour equals an acre per hour per foot of implement. So if we're pulling a 60-foot toolbar, we're doing 60 acres an hour, minus, of course, any turn time, fill time. And here's a picture of the planter running through that strip till. This happens to be corn on corn where we didn't do the vertical till, and I really prefer not to do the vertical till at all ahead of our corn crop. One thing to really watch there, here we're kind of driving through a waterway, look how smooth those row units are running through the field there. You know, precision planting, their whole concept, I'm sure a lot of you have been to the meetings or been on their website, you know, that right of that planter is so critical. Well, as I was coming up here thinking, when you're riding on the ATV behind the planter and that thing is just as smooth, and then if we're planting into, say, something we had to till for whatever reason or correcting some tile lines and that planter's just sitting there chattering. I like to compare it, and I'm an avid snowmobiler and snowmobiled a fair amount in Ontario. You know, you come up to the intersection and the trail's kind of rough, you're kind of choppy, and that new skidoo R motion isn't even keeping up. And you see that you come to the fork on the trail, and the groomer just went that way. That's the way that row unit runs through the field following that pluribus unit. It's just like when you hop on that freshly groomed trail, and it is just smooth sailing. Here, we're just going to go through some of the corn stages, you know, right at emergence there. We got our trash pushed away, trying to, you know, not have that allelopathic effect. Got nice uniform emergence. One thing about the spring strip till, as you go through there, you know, you do that little bit of tillage. I know that's a bad word, but we're doing that little bit of tillage to warm it up. And we have a very uniform moisture layer. When you're planting that seed, every seed is laying into that same moisture level, because along with that whole precision planting concept, and we've all read the studies, getting that corn to all emerge within that, 18-hour or 36-hour window is critical. That's more critical than your in-row spacing, is getting that uniform emergence. And there, in my area, there's a few strip tillers. It hasn't caught on real big yet, but when I have a field like this along a blacktop, I get more compliments on that. We got the nutrients right there for that early lush growth. Got the old corn stalk standing up in the middle. Something I've learned here, wheat in our area is non-existent. I wouldn't even know where to tell you to drive to find a field of wheat in northern Iowa, where I understand that's a pretty critical part of you guys' rotation. With our large concentration of ethanol plants, we're probably, there's a lot of continuous corn in our area. So this has worked real well compared to the chopping stalks, the deep ripping, the 2 passes of secondary tillage. One thing I didn't mention, when we're running our strip till rig, we bring up the performance monitor on the tractor. Basically, when the combine leaves the field with 0.4 of a gallon of diesel fuel, we're ready to plant corn. That strip tillage pass is only consuming 0.4 of a gallon. However, that converts to liters for you guys, but there's another. And we side dress 2/3 of our nitrogen needs, putting on liquid 32%. We're getting about 1/3 of our nitrogen on early, or 1/3 on early in the strip from the combination of the nitrogen that's in the DAP and also AMS. And if it's a corn-on-corn field, then we'll spike in some urea to up that nitrogen rate. A little more taller growth stage on the corn going into mid-June. And corn on beans. We're still a lot of corn on soybean rotation. And what you see there in the middle of the row, we have that row completely covered in residue. You just have a perfect area for that microbial biological activity to continue, just like we heard this morning as we leave that soil exposed to sunlight and tillage, how we're consuming that carbon, where here we're providing an excellent spot for microbial activity. Once in a while we'll have a misguided strip due to whatever, you just got out of rhythm making your turn, GPS didn't grab in quick or had a little obstacle, or you can definitely see kind of the taller growth of corn there, because here's the strip here where the planter didn't follow it. Either the strip tiller wasn't quite tuned in. So we're definitely getting that warming effect, that fertility zone effect. Another shot of some, and then I've got dug a couple plants there, if you can see them at the bottom. Planted one in the strip and one that missed the strip. So he missed his warmer soil, missed his fertility zone until the roots reach out that far. So it's pretty critical to make sure you're going to land on that strip. Picture those roots again, just laying on the back of the pickup there. But just look at that root mass that we're getting in that warmed, fertilized zone. Here's a shot. I remember this field, we purposely ran the rig out of fertilizer. One thing, if some of you are looking at going to StripTill and haven't had a lot of experience handling dry fertilizer, you're used to calling the co-op to spread it. Dry fertilizer in a heavy rain event predicted, or you can see the clouds over the horizon, get your rig empty. Dry fertilizer and water. I see a guy smiling there. He's had his fertilizer rig plugged before. So, we'll purposely do that. Here's another spot for whatever reason, whether we lost signal, might have broke one of the metering drive chains. You're bound to have little issues. That's just the little issues you see when the co-op's broadcasting your fertilizer. You never see those issues because you didn't even know they happened. So that's just showing that early growth effect we're getting out of banding our nutrients. Because that corn is definitely, it's planted right in the strip. It's got the warming effect, but it didn't have that early fertility effect. Here's back in 08 when we first started strip-tilling with Don, we actually held a field day for Jim Bassett and Don Equipment out to our farm. And I came up with this concept of, let's take some white boards, 30 inches wide, replicating a 30-inch row of corn. I weighed out the fertilizer if you're going to broadcast, like showing on that board. So it's so many grams per square foot. Broadcast that fertilizer on the board onto kind of a sticky urethane coating. Kind of gives you that visual of, okay, here's my root mass, and I got fertilizer out here in the center of the row. That might not be doing me much good for this crop. There might have been a 18-450 tire drive across there. Well, that's not going to give you much root growth there where you just put your fertilizer. And these roots represent, I got them spaced every 6 inches, so it's a 34,000 stand. Just made easy math going an even increment like that. And that's typically what we are planning. And then I did the same thing with the StripTill fertility zone. So with that pluribus unit, we're blending that into that top 5 inches of soil, about 8 inches wide, so we really don't have that hot spot like a shank machine. And we're putting on 75% of what our universities call removal rate. And I like to maybe knock on that removal rate a little bit, or they call it broadcast rate, where we're getting such a better efficiency out of our fertilizer. And I got some slides to follow on ended up a 20-year study showing where we're running reduced rates of fertilizer, but we're not mining our soils. And here, kind of a little graph summarizing that strip-till effect, or that zoning effect. On that conventional till, we're applying, or on that broadcast rate, 360 pounds of fertilizer using that blend, DAP, potash, AMS. At that time, the cost was $74. And your concentration per square foot is 3 3/4 grams per square foot. So we take that same formula, but we're putting on 75% of that in the zone. We're putting on 270 pounds, cost us $56. And what the root mass is seeing there is a concentration of 10.5 grams per square foot. So in comparison, where your root mass is, to see that same effect that we're getting by zoning our fertilizer, banding it, you would have to broadcast 1,010 pounds an acre. And when you call up your retailer and tell them to spread the North Smith 80 at 10,010 pounds an acre, I'll guarantee you will get a Christmas card and probably a nice glazed ham from that co-op. I know this sheet's a little busy. This is a spreadsheet with a ton of formulas built into it that my son and I put together, kind of comparing our conventional tillage broadcast and our strip till rate and our efficiencies. I need to adjust our fuel price a little bit down there. But the long and short of this is for our operation, between just the fuel and fertilizer savings, it amounts to about $25,000 a year. And that's not including what I feel we have much less soil erosion, so whatever value you want to put on that ton of soil, it's definitely less hours on that main horsepower tractor, like saying, 4/10 of a gallon or operating at a 60 acres per hour efficiency to plant corn. We're definitely not putting the hours on that high horsepower stuff. So, the savings, you could easily argue that are double that. Here's, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. This is a 20-year comparison of soil tests that we happen to be. And I'll admit, through a lot of my evolution into StripTill, I was lax on soil testing. I just figured, hey, I'm feeding the crop, not the soil, so I'm not as worried about my soil. But it worked out. We're starting to reestablish a good soil testing regimen now, and that's a whole nother story. I just sat in on a corn college. I'm sure a lot of you read the Farm Journal and Ken Ferry, the Farm Journal agronomist. I was just last week down to Ames at his 2-day corn college. And most agronomists will agree, your soil test, the variables that can make up a soil test, the time of year that you're sampling, the soil moisture when you're sampling, if you're switching labs, there's different methods of soil testing. Ken Ferry kind of described it. It's kind of like at the fair and you're herding sheep or pigs in the show ring. You kind of get a general direction, but don't get too wound up on minute numbers. So this is our 20-year comparison. These farms I happened to be running when Dad and I were still farming together before he retired. Looking at, here in yellow is our 1994 levels, and in blue is our 2014 levels, and the range of the tests, And I still want to do this out on a field. We've talked about grid sampling and everything. You gotta take a 80-acre field on 2-acre grids, you'd end up with 40 samples. Take those same 40 samples, say in an area as big as this stage, I'll almost guarantee you'll have just as much variability out of those 40 samples out of this small area as you will off the whole farm. So I still, like I say, soil testing is just kind of like herding the sheep. You kind of know what direction it's going, but don't get too hung up on the numbers. But bottom line on this, when we averaged everything together in 1994, these weren't done by no GPS or grid sampling. We're doing more zone sampling. But in 1994 compared to 2014, our P1 levels are basically identical, and our K levels are basically identical. And for that 20 years, we have been applying our fertility in a below removal rate procedure, basically 75%, maybe even a little less of that, a few of the lean years in there. And we haven't affected our soil tests at all. This just puts it into a bar graph example of that same chart there off these 4 different farms. And basically our averages are, for all practical purposes, I'd call that a wash. Then this summer, right before we were I was asked to do this presentation at the first no-till conference that Frank Lessiter from No Till Farmer put on at Cedar Rapids. I know a couple of you were down to that conference. About the day before, my son and I went out and we did a root pit. Whenever we're fixing tile in the field, I love to be in the hole and just see that soil structure. And this is on a long-term corn soybean rotation, no-till, strip-till farm. You know, you look at the soil structure there, the granular health of the soil, some deep earthworm channels. And as we're looking across the row here, you see that root mass there. Kind of really don't have too many roots right in the center of the row in that top 2 or 3 inches where, you know, that broadcast fertilizer application would have gone. There's even a better picture of, you know, as your roots are migrating down about a 35-degree angle, doesn't it make a lot of sense to put your fertility right there? And then another thing at that corn college, a point that was brought out, Ken Ferry had been doing a lot of work with starter fertilizers. You know, guys are debating pop-up or 2x2. And he was kind of showing a cumulative effect of, you know, a pop-up might be getting the guy 5 bushel, but if he added a 2x2, or if he did 2x2 by itself, that might have been a 5 bushel kick. But if he did both, he was getting a 15 bushel kick. It was kind of like a handoff. That first root coming out of your seed is hitting that first little zone of pop-up fertilizer. As that root mass continues to grow, it's kind of like handed off, kind of like a baton in a relay race or something, that root's going to that 2x2 placement. Well, the way we're applying our fertilizer with that, blending it in that top 5 inches, we're handing it all the way down. We're never at a loss for fertility in that root zone. And then that day we were out there, it was kind of a foggy afternoon. We had a little mist in the morning. And, you know, something I've been farming all my life, and every once in a while, you know, duh, this is kind of obvious. You look at the plant, nutrients and moisture. What's the number one thing you need to get nutrients up into that corn plant? You need moisture. What's the corn plant do? The corn plant is like a huge funnel out there. With just a little bit of dew, you've got some stem moisture trickling down the stalk of the plant, going right here at the base of the plant. The center of the row is dry. Where's my fertility? My immobile nutrients, the P and K, and it's right here where the moisture is going. Wow. This is kind of a perfect little plant here, and you got all these leaves for a huge solar panel, and you got to have sunlight and nutrients to create photosynthesis, which naturally equates to yield. So let's put the fertility right where the moisture is going to be and right where the plant can utilize it. There's a little closer up. You can just see that damper zone right there, right at the base of the plant. Like I say, as you look through there, it's just amazing the amount of green surface, that huge solar panel we have out in all our cornfields. As we were leaving Toronto Airport, the driver pointed out on a hillside some solar panel farm. I thought, God, what a waste of good ag land, just putting solar panels. Why don't you grow a renewable crop out there like corn and harvest the energy of that corn crop? I'm sure there was probably politics involved in that. Good thing like our wind energy in Iowa has nothing to do with politics. We won't even go there. And here, as you guys, if some of you are looking at moving to StripTill or looking at, do I want to do a fall? Do I want to do a spring? These are just some bullet points that we've kind of learned over the years. The advantages of the spring StripTill. For us, it was hard to get everything done in after harvest. A lot of times our harvest gets into where we're starting to get a little snow on the ground maybe, or freeze up. It leaves me wide open on crop rotations. Even today, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to grow for a crop mix. I think I'm probably going to maybe go back to closer to that even rotation, a few more soybeans. But yet, till we pull in the field with either the soybean planter or the strip tiller, we're wide open on those options. The corn residue. And I know the newer shank machines are definitely better, that Kraus Gladiator among other ones out there that can handle the corn residue better than what the machines were back in the late 90s when I was using them. But that fresh, fluffy corn residue can be a big issue in the fall. It wasn't uncommon when we were trying to do that. What's all these beaver huts out there in the field as you're trying to clean out the toolbar? Letting the corn residue overwinter takes that fluffiness out, starting to get some decomposition out of it. It's a lot more fragile residue than to get through the toolbar in the spring. And by going spring, I feel we have less chance if we do have to go up and down our slopes. Occasionally we try not to, but you know, the way some fields lay out, we have less chance of that strip eroding out if we get that 3.5, 4.5 inch thunderstorm. And by going the spring colder type unit, we're definitely less horsepower, less fuel, more acres per hour. There again with a faster ground speed, and like I say, with less fuel. And in the spring, especially like say we're running a day after, it's a lot easier to see these fresh strips. I remember when we were running the shank machine in the fall, come back in the spring, and that was, you know, the lights on a good old 1486 aren't near what they are on all these HID lights and stadium lighting that we have on our new modern tractors. But it was almost impossible at night to see some of the strips that we had made the previous fall. And your ground's mellower. It flows through the toolbar better, flows through the colders better. It's had that freeze-thaw cycle. And then, like I've explained with the way we're doing it with the colder unit, we're mixing that fertility into that whole root zone instead of that one concentrated spot like a lot of times you end up with a shank type machine, and sometimes with a shank you're putting that fertility 6-7 inches down in the soil. You've got a week, 10 days, 2 weeks before your roots are really going to hit that fertility. And for us, this bottom one is huge. A hell of a lot less rock to pick up. Some of the disadvantages of going to the spring: it does tighten up our workload in the spring, but like your conventional neighbor, he's got a field cultivator running out there, we've got our StripTill bar running out there. Downtime with the strip tiller, if you would have an issue, when you're only a day behind it, downtime with the strip tiller is downtime with the corn planter. You know, just like harvest, you know, if the combine breaks down, everybody's down. The grain cart, the semis, or better yet, if your dryer breaks down, your corn dryer, that shuts down the whole operation. Same way in the spring, downtime with the strip tiller is definitely downtime with the planter. Fertilizer logistics. That's when your co-ops are the busiest, trying to get you fertilizer delivered out. You know, when they're doing their fall P&K applications, they got a little wider window. They're not doing all their, you know, crop spraying and everything. They have a little more available labor. So you definitely need to look at your fertilizer logistics. Basically, probably having your own tender truck to at least they can deliver to, or you can run to your supplier to get the fertilizer. And there's the results. This happens to be on the other side of the ethanol plant. So we're very fortunate. We have a huge market for our crop close by. Just some numbers I put together. Our farming operation, like I say, is in Butler County, Iowa. In Iowa, we have a CSR rating, corn suitability rating. I'm sure you guys have something similar in here to rate your soils in Ontario. Our soil quality that we particularly farm is a few points less than the county average. So I figure, oh, well, if I'm getting the county average, I'm doing good on poor quality soil. But over the last 6 years, we have consistently yielded more than 10% over the county average with a lower quality of soil than what the county has. And that's the favorite picture you love to see in the fall. Grain tank full, call the guys on the radio, see how hard you can make them work with the grain cart and the trucks. So, but that's the end result. PowerPoint by Clay. Like I say, I'm getting too old for all this technology, the PowerPoint, the GPS auto steer. I'm so glad I have a son that's following me through the farming to understand all this IT stuff. And that's our return on investment. That's some of my buddies and Clay on the left, and like I say, we're avid snowmobilers, and I'm glad you guys get a lot of snow up here. So with that, I hope you guys learned a little something from my experiences or what we're doing in Iowa. And I guess I hit it about right. We got about 8 minutes left. And I guess we can open it up for questions.
Any cards?